Okay,
I feel like I'm
you're good.
All right, welcome everyone. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion to approve the agenda for the business meeting of tonight, August 11, 2025.
And Barrett and Jim?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, before we move to open forum, we would like to just give a shout out and mention that the PTSA School of Excellence Award has happened. And so, Janine, are you still the president? Okay, congratulations. I think that that is absolutely wonderful. I know that there was a lot of work that went into submitting the paperwork and everything else. We're very appreciative because too often, or sometimes I should say, that the paperwork can be daunting and people may not make the effort, but kudos to you and your team for submitting everything so that Greenville could get the recognition of that. So thank you again.
And thank you for everyone who helped us as well. I had a lot of things. We did a lot of people and a lot of clubs, and we were all very welcoming and helpful, and it was a team effort, so thank you.
All right, now I'll move us on to the open forum. And the Greenville Central School District wishes to facilitate public access to meetings of the Board of Education and to provide an opportunity for public comment at these meetings. Accordingly, the open forum provides an opportunity for members of the public to share thoughts about topics on the agenda. An individual's comments shall be limited to 5 minutes. Comments may be emailed to the district clerk, Daphne Pearson, using the email pearsond@greenvillecsd.org. In order for an email to be read during the meeting, it must be received by 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting and state that the email is to be read out loud. Emails shall be limited to 600 words. Please note that this is not the time to register complaints that need to be addressed confidentially through the proper channels. Remarks that might be considered defamatory, obscene, profane, stigmatizing, or otherwise impermissible in public forums are prohibited and will be declared out of order. Board members actively listen during open forum, but may not immediately respond to comments. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Do we have any emails?
We do not.
Okay, then I am going to move us on to our presentation. So come on down, please. And this is going to be the end of the year data report. So the building SIPs and district SIP draft share out by the administrative team.
Good evening, everybody. How are you?
Peachy.
So on behalf of the administrative team, I want to thank you for having us here tonight to present this information, the year in review, the 24-25, an update on the continuous school improvement work that has taken place over the course of this year. We'll keep the same format this evening as we usually do for those of you who've been through this process before. So I'll start with a quick review of our school improvement calendar, our district goals, and we'll talk about the importance of multiple measures. Then we'll move forward and highlights from each of the 3 district goals and review some data points. And then towards the end of the presentation, we'll start shifting our glance towards the future. And we will talk about the 25-26 school year. And we'll present the draft goals that we're working on and strategies that will help us get to where we want to be. Within each section of the presentation, we can answer questions, so please feel free to ask them. But there's also going to be a little bit of time at the end if you'd like to hold your questions until then.
Matt, you know that's not going to happen. But thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Let them fly. All right. Thank you, Ms. Pearson. You have data packets that you've gotten. And in those packets, you have updated copies of the building profiles for the year end 24-25, and evidence of completion documents for the DSIP and the individual building plans. In those packets is much more data than we're going to elaborate on tonight, but it does go into some detail on some of the things that we're going to touch on tonight. So you will find some more detail in there, and I'm always free to answer questions. If you want to send them to Mike and I can help shed some light on anything you see in those end of year data packets. Just a reminder of our board adopted school improvement calendar. And so here we are in August, reflecting on the 24th school year. Towards the end of this presentation, we'll be outlining draft goals for 25-26, just as I had mentioned earlier. And it's important to keep in mind as we do this, the importance of cycle, right? But so this is about continued growth and the development of processes within our improvement cycle and just continuously working to get better, right? So to look back just at district goals from the year 24-25, just to give a refresher and reminder of the things we're working at the district level. Under curriculum, we had two strategies. One was really focusing on rolling out the new bookworms program at Ellis. The next strategy was district-wide in terms of working on our continuous program review process and getting that to a level of sustainability. And in culture, we were working on promoting a positive learning environment by educating the community about healthy norms and behaviors around peer relations, anti-bullying, and harassment. And last, in our community goal, which really focused on communication, we did some explicit training for our teachers and for administration around characteristics and skills for effective two-way communication and how to communicate in this day and age when everybody is so busy. So I can shift back to curriculum highlights. It's so hard to try and summarize so much hard work that we do here in our school district into just a few sentences, but let me give it a try. All right, so, and it's like, as I say this, I think, wow, all that work, and I just put that all into one bullet point. But this year, we continue to work on updating scope, sequence, and pacing guides across subjects. You've heard us talk about curriculum maps. Well, we've gone in many places past the curriculum maps where we're actually getting a sequenced pacing guide in there with even more detail. And we find that to be very helpful when we have turnover in courses and who's teaching courses. We've also supported the soft rollout of the ELA Bookworms program at Ellis and integrating really great reading into that. Year 4 of our really great reading program, sustaining that program, integrating it into the ELA program that's going forward. Our program review process, like I mentioned, has gotten to the point where it's sustaining, where we have our department chairs and grade level leaders and coaches working on these documents rather than being done from a top-down level. At the secondary level, we advanced initiatives in executive functioning and student engagement. Highlighting the work of our instructional coaches, they supported growth for both our staff and students, which included the second year of our oral reading fluency work. We've also continued consistent use of our data program, or data protocol, and we embedded AEG into our school improvement process. Additionally, I'd like to focus on the work that we did this year in training our aides. All folks participated in de-escalation training in November, as well as a follow-up session in March. Also, instruction-wise, these folks at Ellis were trained in bookworms, and across the district, aides were trained in supporting students with disabilities. In addition to those classroom pieces, we did work on safety protocol trainings and playground-specific safety training. So our work with aides this year was an emphasis, and we intend to continue on that.
Matt, just a quick question. For the executive functioning, is that only at the high school? Is it middle school, high school? And will you be talking a little more about it later on?
Yeah, it was a elementary school, middle school piece. Learning at the elementary school, kind of a multi-year phase thing. middle school was supporting executive functioning through work that they were doing on teams and through the intervention process in addition to that. And at the high school, the work the high school was focused on, that's where the engagement work really was. That was the focus of their building improvement plan. So executive functioning, part of that, but really the lens there was engagement for students.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So let's go ahead and forward and take a look at the class of 2025.
Okay, so here are post-secondary plans for our recent graduates. As you can tell, our graph looks a little bit different than it does last year, and I'm not just talking about the color. We had 3 students who made commitments to the different branches in the military. We had a student go to the Army, sign up with the Marines, and also another one with the Coast Guard. We have roughly 3% more students going right into the workforce this year compared to last year. So, with our small graduating class, those 3 students going into the military and the 3% change to the workforce, it looks like that our overall college bound students have dropped, but it really just kind of evened out. Like, for example, I know 2 out of the 3 military students got into college as well too, but they're going into the reserves first.
I have a question. On the workforce percentages, do you have any way of tracking how many of them are coming out of one of the Questar programs with their certifications?
I'm sure I can't answer that for some, but not for all. I'm sure we can get some data around that, absolutely.
I'm just looking to see, like, are we preparing them for what they're going into, or is it just that they don't know what they want to do except not really college?
Yeah, well, and I even think of just like a couple of the graduates from a couple of years ago. Like, I can tell you some of them definitely went into construction or something else to do with heavy equipment. I know another one of our students that went into heavy equipment was a manager at a fast food place, for a while. So that has nothing to do with what he did in Questar, but he was still, being successful. So that's a great question, Kelly. And I have one more slide too on post-secondary plans. So I think there was a question asked on like where do we stand with the compared to nationally. So this information is from the National Clearinghouse, and while we have no new data from the Clearinghouse, they don't release information annually. We can still take a look at where our students are headed compared to the past to a few years ago. When you look at this data, make sure that you know that those numbers represent percentages. They're actually not numbers of students. The good news here is that we are above both we're above the national percentage for the other rural schools. So if you take a look at where we compare to other rural schools, we're above. Roughly 72% of our students are headed to some type of college, which is above the other 2 comparisons as well.
Just really quick, you probably noticed that there's no data for national or rural or all schools for the workforce and military, and they don't publish that information. So the information we get on college is through one of our collaborating partners. So that information is very clear, but there's not an official, because those are tracked state by state, I guess is what I've gotten as I've spoken with these folks. But just so you know, that's why that data's not there.
I think what might be interesting is to also look at it over time. So let's just say, I don't know, compared to 10, 15 years ago, are we seeing any shifts? Is it kind of holding constant, and so forth? I'm just curious about that.
All right, so now we're going to shift into looking at some snapshots of our data. And we're going to start with our iReady data. We use iReady as a diagnostic screener. 3 times a year, our students in grades 2 through 8 take this for both reading and math. This graph shows on the right our district in comparison to New York State at the same time at the spring, which is the last time that they take the diagnostic. And then we see our national year-to-date as well on there. So if we're looking at that, we can see that we have a larger percentage of students who are performing at 1 grade level or below. That's in the yellow.
And these are the students that we focus on to try to move them into the green areas of proficiency, which is on early on or mid or above grade level. All right, now the second slide shows the movement of the tiers. So if you look at the September data, that was what our 2nd to 8th graders, where they fell into those 3 categories. The green is on or above, the yellow is 1 year behind, and then that red is 2 to 3 years below. And if you look, we have our graphs there broken up into the percentages. So we're really looking at, are we making a big impact in shrinking our at-risk learners and growing our green and yellow? So for our middle school, we, at the first diagnostic of the year, we had quite a bit at that high risk, right? Because when they're taking the diagnostic, they haven't learned everything that they need to learn for that year. So it gives us a snapshot, how much do they know coming into 2nd and 3rd grade? And then our most recent data point for the middle school, oh sorry, I just said 2nd and 3rd grade. We're talking about the middle school here. So in 6th and 7th grade and 8th grade, they came in, not having that full curricula. If you look at the top bar that's not faded out, you'll see that movement that happened. So we look for that growth in the green, which went from 23 to 33, growth in the yellow, and then a decrease of our red. And same thing down for Ellis. Ellis came in with 26% in the green, and they grew to 48%. And we decreased our at-risk students from 37 to 18%.
I think the growth, particularly at the elementary school, is fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
Do we have a sense of, in the red, what percentage are special ed?
Yeah, we can definitely pull that.
Just kind of ballpark-ish, and just curious. I don't need an answer right now.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but we could definitely find out that for you, for sure, yeah. This next graph is, so one of the things that iReady really tries hard to impart to its districts is that, proficiency is one thing, looking at where our students are at the end of the year as far as meeting those grade level standards. But we are really focusing on the growth of our students, because regardless of what level they fell in the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, did they make growth? So were their interventions working? Was their classroom instruction working? Are we seeing that growth? So these graphs show the growth that was made. So this is the median percent progress toward typical growth for a year is 110%. So Ellis is 110% for their reading, and Greenville Middle School is 122%.
What do you think accounts for the difference at the middle school? Because if I look at the chart above, I wouldn't expect to have more growth at the middle school, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, you know what? When we dive into that every year and we pull apart the different grades, we'll often find, and we'll talk about that specific group of kids. And so it's really more of looking at each of the cohorts individually. I think you can see too over time, when I show you the historical one, of how that changed, and then we can talk a little bit more about, well, what influenced that? But I would say every year that group of kids, the team gets together and they talk about what are those specific things that they have done. And I think that one of the things that what Matt talked about with the executive functioning, that does impact when they are, I know some of the grades this year did like test taking strategies and things like that. So it could have impacted, we are always kind of looking at, well, what was it? But you really have to dive in with each of the teams to find out, well, what was it there with that particular group of kids to really figure it out.
Before you go on to the question about some verbiage here, I looked at this sentence last year, and I don't even, maybe I asked a question about it, but I still am puzzled by the term median % progress towards typical growth. Can you explain to me what that actually means?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So iReady has a scale of what they expect to happen in terms of growth over a course of the school year, which they categorize as typical growth. And then they also have a different category that's called stretch growth. That's people who exceed that expectation. When they're talking about the median %, right, what they're looking at is, let's take Ellis as the example. Let's line up all the students at Ellis who took iReady in a line from, starting on the path here, all the way down to Ellis. They put the student who scored the highest at the front of the line, they put the student who scored lowest at the end of the line, and then everybody else would be in order in between. That middle student, the median student, that student's growth was 110%. iReady wants, over the course of the year, they want you to hit 100% towards typical growth, right? It's like hitting their growth target. So when they're saying Ellis is 110%, it doesn't mean that 110% of the students, right, because that would be impossible, 110% of the students achieve typical growth. It's a way of taking averages out of it by just looking at that median. Just at that median student, what did they do in their progress towards typical growth? So at Ellis and at the middle school, on iReady Reading, the median student exceeded that benchmark that iReady has set for typical growth. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'm just wondering is that the data that iReady wants you to report to us? Is that what's typically reported to all schools that are participating in iReady? Or is that a piece of data that we've chosen to present because it's rosier?
iReady gives us data in two ways. They give us this growth metric, and then they give us the achievement metric. So when we share, then there's under the achievement metric, there's other different ways they show it. So when we share this is an achievement metric, right? This percentile or percentage of students at or above grade level, 3 levels below, so on and so forth. And this is just achievement. This is also an achievement benchmark right here, right? Percentage of students at which level. Just not taking into account anything else. But then they also have this growth metric. iReady gives us both of those as a standard piece when we ask them for the data from them.
Matt, do you know if the term typical growth, is that a fluctuating piece of data? Meaning it changes year to year?
Like the target,
Yeah.
like what it takes to make typical
Well,
growth.
to my way of thinking, typical growth may not be ambiguous, but I wouldn't consider it actual data. Somebody has figured out what typical growth is. Now, maybe they actually calculated it by a huge percentage of result of testing. Versus what I would see is an actual product of data being a number of students took a performance exam or whatever, and the average came out, and then that is compared year over year, and that would be growth.
I can't speak to exactly how they calculate the metrics that they set to get to 100% of typical growth. I know that 100% target stays stagnant year after year. I would have to ask them more details on that.
Melissa, you said something earlier about the tests and what they would score at in September. And obviously they're not learning that information yet. So am my understanding that whatever they're getting tested on in September, they're getting tested on again mid-year and then at the end of the year in a specific grade level, so you're seeing the growth based on that, or is it changing all the time?
Yeah, it is changing. It adjusts to where they are at. Yes,
But essentially what they're doing in September, you should see growth in the next one.
yeah.
And so in a typical school year, you would expect a student to hit this much growth.
Right,
based on
right.
curriculum and learning.
Yeah. So when they take that first iReady diagnostic, they get a standard score. And then iReady says, okay, for this student to make their annual growth, they need to increase their standard score by 13 points by the end of the year, right? So when they do that, then they meet their growth. Then they meet their 100%, yeah.
But it also could mean a kid is still in like a little yellow now,
Right.
not necessarily
Right,
green.
right.
They're
That's why it's
red,
important to get that.
Or they make typical growth, which you're happy to see in a student who might be struggling. You want their whole year to see growth, but it still might mean.
So the question asked earlier, do we know which percentage of students that are special ed make up the 2 to 3 years below? Melissa and I were looking at class breakdowns of growth, and we actually noticed in a couple of our self-contained special ed classrooms, those were some of the rooms where we had the largest amount of growth on the growth scores. However, those are still rooms when we go and look at the achievement levels, those students can still be in the red, but have shown a lot of growth over the course of the year.
Okay, so our next slide, this is the historical breakdown of that annual growth across the last few years. So really, this year was in line with the last couple of years, even though we had a jump from last year to this year for sure. So it's when that line is, that goes across horizontally there, that's 100%. So we always want to see those bars above 100%.
Matt, how much ability do you have to ask iReady that for the expected annual growth, if we're going through and just taking the median, can we take like 10% at the median? So it's not just dependent on one individual, because I have a feeling at the middle school, that individual made a lot of growth. And if we're trying to look at a cohort, or we're trying to look at, kind of get a better sense, then taking a group right around the median might provide us with a more solid number. I don't know if that's something that we could ask for or not. I don't know.
I can ask for things from them. I don't know if they'll be able to provide it. And one thing I will say is they have professional statisticians working for them who pull this information and decide what is relevant and what to share. And while we have asked for other data points from them and they've had conversations with us about it, I do think the information they share with us is relevant and valid. I think this measure of looking at a median rather than an average, I think is an accepted practice across several areas of looking at information that comes out of looking at data. It's a
Absolutely, and I
common
think that the
practice.
median is much better than an average, because on average, my head's too hot, my feet are too cold, but on average, I'm feeling peachy.
Yeah.
How about this? What if I phrase the question differently? How much variation am I seeing in the mean? Because if we're not seeing a lot of variation, then great, the answer is there, and we can feel comfortable. If we start to see variation, a significant percentage point variation around the mean, that's a different story. Because if I moved one over, then I might fall below. I'm just, So I am curious, maybe asking for it for the variation might yield the same information.
We can ask.
And if they laugh when we ask the question, you can come back to us and say, forget it.
Laughed.
Before you go on,
I want to dig into this a little bit farther, but I don't want to be here all night either. If we go back to your first or second page, the I-ready reading end of the year, if I look at this, it says to me that 58% of our students are at least a year behind. Am I looking at that right?
Are you on
I'm adding up yellow, pink, and red.
this right here, Jim?
Yeah.
All right.
And then look at the growth charts. Maybe this will help me understand it. If I look at the growth charts, we're getting 110% or more growth out of the median student. So could that be possible that they're moving from 3 years behind to 2 years behind, and that's considered growth?
That's right. That's right.
But they're still way behind.
That's right. It's moving every student from where they are, right?
Like that, stretch growth, those 8% of the same students.
So, like the example that I gave when Melissa and I were looking at, not just grade levels, but classrooms and where was growth the highest. Well, places where we saw some of the highest growth was places where we have some of our students who have large deficits.
So, this is just me thinking out loud. If all the students were mid or above grade level, 100% of our students were capable, then most probably our growth would be very small.
It would be on.
It would be small relative to the typical number they're giving you.
I think for each student there's a growth based on how you start the year. Eric takes the test in September and Eric didn't here. So based on where Eric started here, we would expect if he was to hit typical growth, he would make it to here, right? And
So if everybody started on grade level at the end of the year and finished on grade level, there would be typically very small growth. Which is not a bad thing, it just means everybody's capable.
depending if you made that target that was set, because it's fixed based off of all the learners, they have through their sample, and that they've looked at patterns over time where they set that target.
And just to add to, one thing that we do see is that our younger students have much larger growth when we're looking at the middle school. It's smaller amounts, So speaking of which, I think we're on the slide for the middle school there. Yep. So this is middle school I-ready reading progress. This was our annual typical growth again. And so for the second year in a row, we're at 122, which is great, right above that line. So that's what we like to see, that it didn't go below that line. And hopefully it'll continue to trend up.
What have we done differently in the past couple of years at the middle school? Because I thought that a lot of the phonics were, the rollout of bookworms and everything else is at the elementary. Is there something at the middle school that's helping?
Yeah. Well, there were two things that after you asked that question the first time, just about like, what was it when we first looked at that initial slide? Two things did come to my mind. The first was our outside coaches that come from Questar have worked with the 3 middle school ELA teachers on aligning and looking closely at intervention practices. So that's one thing. The other thing, we took a lot of our 6th grade students who typically will just have 1 lab in a 4-day cycle, and we gave them 2 labs if they could fit it into their schedule. And that has helped too. I know that a lot of the teachers have started incorporating more fluency and vocabulary. So looking at that growth has been really good to see. I think the more we can get those teachers together to collaborate, the better. Sometimes we've had to really think outside of the box for students if something's not working with their schedule and we have openings in other lab areas to say, hey, can we make this work for this kid? And so even though there's a small percentage of that, every year there's a couple kids where we have to think outside of their schedule and make something else work. If they do music or band, could we do something here in ninth period because this teacher has an opening here and they've already done this in the past, can we do that? So we have done that as well. But like I said, I think the biggest thing is just the teacher collaboration. When they get together and they collaborate and they share what they're doing, it builds excitement and it builds like, hey, this has worked, so why don't you try this too?
And also support what Melissa's saying, I think the really great reading has, we're seeing that now, 4 years in now.
Yeah.
So we've had students that go all the way through middle school with really great reading too.
Yeah.
So, and we, before really great reading, we may have had six students in a reading group, and now we are really tailoring it to exactly the levels they're on. Really great readings, there might be 2 or 3, but they're getting really explicit instruction. So I think that has also been a part of the, just maintaining, seeing growth there with our students.
Yeah, and this year for 6th grade ELA lab, we did have a few lab students that did phonics and fluency group because the teacher was trained in really great reading, and so she brought that and continued that program.
It's the same thing for the special ed students as well. And the special class reading, they're also using really great reading and self-contained classes and consultant teaching. Yes.
So looking at iReady assessment time was something we started to do last year, and I thought it would be worth continuing to do as we evaluate how we're using our classroom time and working to be as efficient as possible with that resource. So this is just a measure of this spring. iReady ELA diagnostics took a median time of 54 minutes at Ellis and 56 minutes at the middle school. We had many students exceeding iReady's recommended times. iReady recommends the ELA diagnostic take approximately 40-50 minutes for grades 2 to 8 and 40 to 60 minutes broken up into sessions for kids in K and 1. Now our kindergarten students do not take iReady. So at Ellis, 43.7% of our students took more than 60 minutes. Last year, that figure was about 1/3. And at the middle school, about 35% took more than 60 minutes. Last year was similar, about 40%.
That's not an indication of them struggling with it, right?
It's not, no, I don't believe so. It's a measure of just the time that's devoted to it.
Well, I'm trying to, so when they take iReady, they go until they get a certain number wrong or something like that? Is that?
It's the test adjusts
It adjusts to the
as they
student's
go, and once
So
it
they're spending
zeros.
more time, things are going somewhat well for them. They're not getting shut out because they're not doing anything.
The system will flag a student if they are rushing, right? If they keep on getting things wrong, but the timing and pacing seems wrong, right? They'll get a red flag or they'll get a yellow flag, and we revisit that. And we have some students who will test multiple times if they red flag through the test. Some students have learned that they'll get the red flag and they'll pace themselves, but maybe still not be completely engaged. That's particularly, I think, with older students. Taking into context and looking at this, because it's something that teachers do talk about quite a bit, is the amount of time that we commit to this, and making sure that we're being as efficient as possible with the classroom time we have, right? That's the number one limited resource that we have, is time. It's always on the tip of everyone's tongue when we think about what's a barrier. So we're always looking at how we are using that.
Kind of piggybacking on what Kelly was saying, with the group that's taking more than 60 minutes, is there then any type of follow-up, perhaps with an oral reading fluency, to then see, okay, am I seeing something, or is it just the kid had a bad day?
So at the elementary school, we use oral reading fluency for for everybody, right, initially at the beginning of the year to get a gauge of where they're at. And then depending on how they are, we'll do that again during the winter time. If it's a student who was at or above grade level in oral reading fluency, we will not do that again in the winter time because they're signaling that they're strong. We use the oral reading fluency data alongside the iReady data to make decisions, in addition to really great reading data, to make decisions on who gets intervention, right? So like you're saying, yeah, we are. We're looking at multiple points to really help us zero in and target who has needs, which is primarily the purpose of a program like iReady. Right? I mean, we talk about here in a kind of accountability and progress, for us as a district, and it's really designed as an instructional tool.
I would kind of to follow up to David, so like the majority of our kids appear to be reading below grade level. But do you find that that actually translates in real life? Like if we took our kids, put books in front of them that were age appropriate that they liked, would they truly not be able to get through the book and comprehend it? Or do enough of them just have figured out, what does it take me to get through this thing that I have to sit for days at, because I know it can be really unpopular among. I have a niece who has a PhD now in literature, who failed every standardized test she took and was claiming not being able to read until she was in 6th grade. She just couldn't be bothered with dealing with things she didn't want to deal with.
That's a really good question, and it's a difficult one to answer, right?
That's what really matters. It really matters if they can read and comprehend, not.
When we look at all of our data points that we have from kindergarten up through 12th grade, we look at kind of the 11th grade regions as being well, everybody finally has to take this, right? And where do we end there? And we're looking at the 3 to 8 testing data and trying to make comparisons to New York State, and we're looking at things like iReady data, and we're looking at where students are, drilling down into the iReady data, like comprehension, is that the issue? Vocabulary, is that the issue? Is it a phonics thing? So it's all these pieces where students can have strengths or weaknesses, and trying to put your finger on, is this somebody who's maybe not doing well in iReady, but is an avid reader and loves to read, and they do well in class and class responses, and that's part of the questions that we ask ourselves when Melissa and her team get together and they're doing intervention. When they say, okay, we've got this data point on a student from iReady, what do we have here from oral reading fluency? What do we have here from really great reading? What do we have from the classroom teacher as their input on this student? So we try to put all that information together to figure out who needs the support the most. And that's a lot of the work that they do in that intervention.
Now, do you think that we're still falling, that's kind of reality, that this test is showing us that most of our kids are kind of below?
I will certainly acknowledge that we still have work to do.
Do you think it's not COVID related, or was that before and we're just kind of, you might have slid and have to build back further?
So the pre-COVID, post-COVID.
It'll be only for the middle school kids at this point, yeah.
You look at however, our students coming into us, as Mrs. Van Fleet could tell you, students are coming to us needier now when they're coming in pre-K, kindergarten, right? So that kind of post-COVID world, that's still real even for students who weren't at school at that time, right? What their experiences that those children had when they were, in their early development.
Should have been at the library, at all the programs at the libraries weren't provided.
Right. So, that's the tough thing. As we go through and when we look at data in Greenville, if we look at things like 3 to 8 testing, we can see that over time we've gone up, right? Pre-COVID, our numbers are higher. But to answer your first question directly, and to go back to David, we're certainly, when we look at the number of students that are proficient as measured by either iReady or New York State, we've made a lot of progress, but we know we have work to do. And nobody up here is standing pat and celebrating one data point over another. We don't live like that. I know you've all heard me say this before. It's the numbers are never as good as they look. The numbers are never as bad as they look. You cannot celebrate one, or you can't let a another data point take you down into the ditches so far that you want to be done doing this job, right? You have to, this is information, and we use this information to help us make decisions and try and make this a better school district, and a school district where everybody is successful and everybody here is learning and being comfortable and enjoying coming to school, right? So, to your question, we have students here who are not reading at grade level, and we want that to be fewer, far fewer. So I mentioned that we drilled down into iReady to get ideas about progress, and this is an area where we have been drilling down for a number of years since we started Really Great Reading, and this is part of our targets that we set on our DSIP. So this is looking at iReady and ESGI data, which is, ESGI is primary skills, right? We're looking at these kind of foundational reading skills that we do in kindergarten and first grade. But when we look at this, what we see is continued gains in phonics and foundational skills proficiency. And the good news there is that this has been a major focus in our school district over the last 4 to 5 years. So this table is showing the percentage of students proficient by grade level in June 2025, all the way over on the right. So if you look where we were back in June 2021 on these metrics, we see some good news there. So while we still have room to grow, this trend is giving us some positive indications that the emphasis that we've placed on phonics and the work that we've done around curriculum and around professional learning with our coaches, it is producing measurable results, and we're moving in the right direction. Yes.
Matt, in looking at it for the second grade, do you feel that additional training is needed, that it might have additional benefits?
So it's a very good question. That's a number there that it stands out, right? It's an outlier. That grade level was one of the later adopters of the program as we rolled it out. So yeah, there's very much so continuing to learn there and to support those folks at that grade level.
All right, so now we're going to do this again, but with math. So back to slide one here. If you look at this shows on the right, that right-hand column is our district in the spring. And in comparison, if you continue looking left there, it's New York State, and then at our national norms. So if you look there, we have, again, a big majority of our students are in 1 level or below with 37. However, we are under the New York State for the at-risk percentages. So we're at 15% and the state is at 19. So that's great that we're underperforming there. Or, well, not underperforming, we're performing really. So this just gives like that overview of 2nd to 8th grade math. Okay, similarly on the next slide, this shows where our students fell in the 3 different categories broken down by the tiers, and that movement that happened from the first diagnostic to the last diagnostic in the spring. I'm going to start with the elementary school here at the bottom. We had 18% that were 2 levels on grade level or above in the fall, and then we're at 52% in the spring. We could see that we had 25% at risk of 2 or 3 grade levels behind, and then in the spring they were only at 10%, which is great to see. Then with the middle school, we saw some good growth with our on grade level population, as well as that middle population of kids that went from 43%, 1 grade level behind. Now we have some shifts happening up to the green there, so that shrank as well. And then we saw a little bit of growth in our hires from 33 to 27%. Okay. Here, this is our progress towards typical growth. Again, that median level student. So here we are at 85% for Ellis, and then the middle school 66%. And the next slide will show that historical growth, which is always good to look at. So if you look, this one is from Ellis over the last couple of years. How did we do making progress towards that annual typical growth? So we're kind of in a similar range there. And for the middle school, let's see here, we're trending down a little bit. The last year and this year, when we've taken a look at our end of year data, what we've seen is that not so much great engagement at the end of the year for our middle school students, particularly in the 8th grade. So our 6th grade and 7th grade made really good progress, but our 8th grade over the last couple of years has not made that typical growth. It could be that they've done this now for 8 years and they're kind of checked out. I don't know, but when we did talk to our iReady rep at the end of this year, they did say that they are changing the interface for middle schoolers to look more middle school and less little kids. So this year will be their first year to take it looking a little bit more grown up, which I think could help, because if you've seen iReady has little funky creatures, and that's just like their background. But they've gotten a lot of feedback that, especially for the middle schoolers, that they want it to look a less babyish, you know. So we'll see if that makes an impact.
So we're looking at time on task with the assessment time for iReady Math, a little bit higher. 58 minutes is the median duration at Ellis, 64 minutes the median duration of the middle school test.
And Matt, what's national? Do you happen to have that?
It's the same recommendations for ELA. So math diagnostics should take approximately 40 to 50 minutes for grades 2 to 8, and then a similar range for grades K and 1, but they emphasize splitting that up, which we do at Ellis. Grades 1 through 5, we split it up. Yes.
Okay, and this is our screener for kindergarteners. We use a couple different things, but we pulled out the number identification and the oral counting. So you have 2 different color graphs there. So if you look at the gray, that was what percentage of students were proficient in these screeners in the fall. So we have 92% of our students doing number identification came up at the proficiency level, and then in the spring, we had 96%.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is that 71 students out of 161?
Oh, so, yes, but the real number, so see how the next graph is 72, that's the actual number.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was assigned.
Yes, yes. And then for oral counting, so in the beginning of the year, the students are asked to count 1 to 10 or 0 to 10. And then at the end of the year, they are added 11 through 20. So we're seeing good growth there at 58%, and then 88% with that in mind, that they were asked even more numbers.
Moving up and taking another look at elementary school math data point is fact fluency. And we use Reflex Math, as many of you know, as an online math tool that helps students master their math facts. It also keeps track of how students are doing with their math facts. So it's consistent. And now it's teaching the students, it's building their skills. So this is, I believe, the 4th year that we've used this program consistently across the school. So I think what we see right here with the tables at the right, kind of comparing for last, where we've been last year and the year before, is that overall, our 24-25 results are comparable to or stronger than past years in most grades, with the note of 3rd grade multiplication division, knowing that cohort came through a little bit lower, and that's information that we'll make sure those 4th grade teachers have and receive in that cohort this year. And then just to talk about, all right, so yeah, grade 5, so 91% of the students are leaving knowing their multiplication and division 0 through 12. What about the other 10% of kids? Well, up in the 6th grade, the 6th grade math teacher does continue to use reflex math as an intervention tool. We continue with intervention on fact fluency at that 6th grade level with the hope of getting everybody to 100%.
So take a look here. Thank you. Under middle school total course failures, this is data that we've been tracking over the past few years, and again, it's tools. We dive into the data and we try to start looking at students and asking questions. And I know our BLT continues to have these discussions every summer. Throughout the school year, we look at this data in terms of students failing courses every 5 weeks. So we have our progress reports in the middle of each quarter every 5 weeks, and then at the end of the quarter. And that's data that actually Melissa takes, and when we sit and talk with teams, we are talking about what's going on with these students. What type of interventions do we look at? Is it more of an engagement organization intervention? Because the student does have the skills, they're just not complete for it. And that, if you recall, past year, that was some of our goals was trying to work on organizational study skills with students. Also, as you look at this data too, please remember it does data for all course failures. So PE's included, agriculture included. We have 10-week courses. The 8th grade, there are 4 10-week courses kids take: Ag, Tech, Facts, and Health. Thank you. So all those are countenances too. And this is data that we look at throughout the year that also helps us set up who the students we are either recommending for summer tutoring also. So it is important data to look at, and also we can have reports where we can take a look at individual failures for each teacher, all right? And, we can take a look at that, and looking at this, the number for middle school here, 24-25, for the 4th quarter went up, increased significantly there. And when we took a look at some things, there was a few teachers that, their numbers, they really had hardly any failures, quarters 1, 2, 3, with quarter 4, all of a sudden they had a big jump. And I was able to talk to a couple of teachers this summer, and probably looking in the year with other teachers to say, hey, what do you think happened in the 4th quarter? And just more make them aware of it too. And I think, talking to a couple of teachers, some of it was just, they felt kids were just either not motivated in the school year in June for either an assessment or a project that they had, or, just tired. We talked about the amount of days we do I-Ready and state assessments. I mean, from April to June, ELA, particularly our 8th graders, was ELA assessments for state math and science, along with 2 different periods of ELA, I-Ready reading and I-Ready math. So there's a lot of that. And by the end there, even on regular coursework in June, you may see some fatigue with our students. But it's definitely data that we will keep looking at, try to find solutions for our students throughout the year. As I was saying, we are taking a look at this every 5 weeks. So it's not just end of the quarter, we just track with this data for the year. It's helpful all throughout the year continuously that we look at it. Also last year, if you recall, we used a lot of this data in our school improvement workshops, again, to focus on growth mindset, organizational skills, and study skills. Because last year we were trying to look at root cause. We didn't necessarily feel that some of the students were failing because of lack of skills, more of that motivation, organizational skills. And that was the goal we focused on this year. This past summer, we definitely looked at how that goal went. Saw some success, still see some challenges and some things that we are tweaking for this upcoming year with that too, because it's still something we feel is important with our students. So we're kind of revamping a few things that we rolled out last year with feedback from our staff on how we can hopefully improve on it this year. So again, it's numbers we'll continue to keep looking at. And you know, we do dive deep with a lot of these things to figure out where there are situations. And you know, like I said, you can then take a look at one course across all 4 quarters too. So just try to see if you can dig deeper for that root cause.
Okay, so here's our course failures for the high school. Our data this year was comparable to last year's. We did have slightly less overall course failures at the end of this school year compared to last school year, as you can see, but we did have more students failing more than one course than we did last school year. So similar to what Brian have said, we also have this gives us a good information for our teachers, for our RTI meetings when we sit down. It drives my weekly meetings that I have with the counselors. We try to figure out like where are the students really struggling, what do they really need help with? Is it a skill deficit or is it more of executive functioning with regards to organization? We discussed which strategies will best support students, how to get them there, like what is the plan. We work with Melissa a lot on doing that, kind of setting up a plan for students to get them going in the right direction. And getting the parents involved too is another big thing that we try to do with high school when students are struggling.
I have a question, both or whoever wants to answer. At what point, so if it's a course failure in the 4th quarter, they failed math in the 4th quarter, is that what that means? So at what point does it become an issue and then we need to repeat the class?
I think that looks different at the middle school than it does at the high school. Melissa does a really great job of compiling all of this data. So we are looking at students, like, so we know, because I think you need 260 points at the end. She's working. I think it's 260 points that you need, like, in order to pass a course. And so if a kid is getting 50 and 50, because we do have a little, at least in high school, first quarter teachers can't give anything less than a 50, because if you give them a 22, because that's what they earned, there's no opportunity to get that grade up for the rest. So we have a floor of 50 for quarter 1. But we also take a look at what students are getting at in the 2nd quarter, because there have been some times where a student is continuing to not be successful. So we have to figure out why, right? What's the root cause there? What are the factors? Sometimes it's a simple plan that we can come up with and they can come back, but we really try to take a look at how the students are progressing through all 4 quarters. Yes, just because a student fails in 4th quarter doesn't mean that they're course failure, that they don't, they could have done. I think that's kind of what Brian was saying with some of his middle school classes, that some of the kids or some of the teachers didn't even have any course failures, and then all of a sudden they had a lot in quarter 4. So that didn't mean that the students failed that course, it just means that they failed 4th quarter. High school's a little bit different, right? You need course credit in order to move on to the next course, so we do have some of those students that end up having to go to summer school for those course failures, but they do need a certain a percentage of points in order to pass for that course. Brian, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think just with the middle school, a student, if they're failing 2 or more full year courses, they would potentially have to repeat a grade. But then if they come to summer tutoring and are successful there, at the end of the summer, we then take a look at that and determine if the student is capable or not at that point. A student can fail 1 course and still move on to the next grade.
At the high school, it's just a matter of credits, how many credits you have in order to get to the next grade level.
Is there a trigger for the Q1, like for teachers in Q1, if they have to do the 50, but clearly the student wouldn't have earned that? Is there a point that they then come to you to say, because that's the point, intervention?
Yeah. We have that information typically at 5 weeks when interim, comes out. But again, Melissa's pulling all of that data regularly. Every 4 weeks, we're meeting with grade level teachers too. So if we don't notice something because it didn't show up, because it's just right under the radar, then that's what the opportunity where it's, we have teachers can say like, I'd really like to talk to Mariah at this next RTI meeting. on, or the beginning of the slide may look similar to last school year. Last school year, we brought NABIT to Greenville. The NABIT stands for Norms and Bystander Intervention Training. This came from a grant from the Department of Homeland Security, and it was given to the University at Buffalo Alberti Center for bullying and abuse prevention. So they reached out to us. We worked with them, not this past school year, but the school year before. We had a small group of students that were trained in NABIT, in bystander training, and they followed up with us. And so this school year we trained a little bit more students, and then we also had the ability to train some of our adults at our November conference day. And then also too, I know you heard from Melissa throughout the school year about Twin County's recovery service. So we feel that this collaboration is instrumental because it provides not only valuable education and resources, not only for our students but also team. So Shannon, our prevention specialist from Twin County, has actively supported both middle school and high school communities. She's visited classrooms to deliver targeted instruction. She presented during some of our faculty meetings at both the middle school and high school. She also offered individual support for students who were struggling with decision making or who were targeted for at-risk behaviors or engaging of unhealthy behaviors. So we were really fortunate to have her for half of the school year this year.
And then just touching upon a few of the other highlights on here. So with our SEL support plans, they are really starting to evolve. And as you recall, in our support plans, they provide interventions for students regarding things with their anxiety, disorganization, maybe some disruptive behavior, poor social skills. And they've evolved in a way now that we're able to progress monitor some of these plans and communicate better with families or try to pull families in, or even look at outside resources that may support some of these families too. We continue with our No Place for Hate, K-8, where Mac Luce is working with Mr. Urban and myself to create kind of character lessons. And then, we are also, part of this is part of it, our PPS department. We're pushing into classrooms and going into classrooms with some of these lessons for our students to continue to try to keep either refreshing or continue to talk about what is appropriate character and behavior of our students who we expect in school on a daily basis. This year in middle school, we actually had we started small, did our first middle school health fair. Our health teacher, Ms. Doherty, really was spearheading out of a committee of people that I thought it was very successful. Students, and we're looking to do it again next year, and students had 3 different sessions that they were able to kind of pick from and pretty much got most of their choices. Which focused on their physical and emotional health. Again, it was just a nice afternoon. I think the kids were very relaxed and enjoyed it and got to do some physical activity and just got some pointers on things, whether it was in the fitness room, just emotional support, mental health, of different things to do with our presenters that we had in. We had some different local presenters come in, very similar to our career day fair too. So that was a nice thing to do. And then just we continue each year to try to talk about cyber safety and bullying. We used our Questar specialists to do a presentation at the beginning of the year with our students, kind of assembly, and then kind of build from that throughout as we try to do refreshers about students with cyber safety. We will continue with that, even though they won't be the proponents there today. We know that that's still going to be something outside of school that can still be an issue with our students. With Aperture, we continue to keep using that. That keeps evolving. Our PPS department continues to look at that. Remember with Aperture that at the K-5 level, the teachers actually fill out complete the forms on our students, and then 6-12 our students are doing a self-assessment of that. And then our PPS department is taking those results, and any students that are kind of flagged, and I think Plan Fleet will talk more a little bit, sometimes we give them 10 to 15%, then our PPS department starts meeting with them to kind of meet with them one-to-one to see what type of support they can provide to the students. And this is, and Fleet, talk a little more about that now.
I think it's important just to kind of give a brief overview, because I know Mariah, you're new to this, and I don't know how much you've heard about Aperture. So Aperture is a software that holds the DESA, which is a social emotional screener that coincides with the New York State social emotional benchmarks. And those benchmarks touch on the 8 areas of competencies of the CASEL. I know there's a lot of acronyms there. Let's just break it down. There's 8 competencies, and it looks at self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, goal-directed behavior, personal responsibility, decision-making, and optimistic thinking. So all of the questions in that DESA form and this is Ellis data, so all of those questions that the teachers are filling out have specific key questions that are targeted in those areas. So when you see the percentages here in these little bars, the green means strength, the blue is your typical behavior or social emotional levels, and then the red is the need for instruction. So when the student, in this case for Ellis, when the teacher is filling out the screener, it starts out with 8 questions. If it starts going beyond where there are specific needs, then that's where additional questions will be added. So we've evolved with this, as Brian has said, so we were only doing pre-tests at first so we could get used to this and get it rolling. We've evolved to pre and post tests, so that's where you will take a look at the 24-25 pre-test, and then the 24-25 post-test. You're able to see the data there, how, you know, especially in the needs area, we were at 12% of need, and now we're down to the 5%. And the specific areas of need that were targeted based on that, on those questionnaires for the elementary school was self-awareness and decision-making. So looking at that data, the BPS team then decides, okay, so number one, we're going to go into the classroom. So it's multifaceted, right? So we have our guidance plan. So in the guidance plan, we're working on social emotional skills. So Jen Payne is going, our guidance counselor is going into classroom doing lessons. We have responsive classroom that also touches on those skills. Then we have our zones of regulation that also talks on how support students on how to regulate their body, as well as our character ed assembly. So it's not, so when you see an area of need, we're looking at it from a multifaceted approach to support those students that fall in that need area. And our ultimate goal is to make sure that all students are getting what they need. But that kind of helps give you an idea of the data what the data charts are showing when you look at it.
Brooke,
Yeah?
could you talk a little bit, you had mentioned that New York State requires this, could you talk a little bit
Yeah,
about
so
that?
the New York State puts out their social emotional benchmarks that we as a school have to make sure that we're touching on those areas that are in the CASEL. And you can actually Google New York State social emotional learning standards, and it'll break all of these categories out. So we didn't, you know, New York State put out these standards. We didn't have an assessment tool we didn't know what areas of deficit that we needed to help support students with. So that's where the BPS team, we spent, I don't know, a few years back, 2022, 2023 summer, looking at a variety of different assessment tools to just give us a snapshot of some of the, you know, social emotional needs of our students based on these competencies. So does that answer your question? I mean, I kind of got off a little bit, but it's multifaceted.
The other thing to note too is that it's a strength-based screener. So when they're asked questions, it's not like, how many times are they doing showing these negative behaviors? It's a strength-based, so that the teacher should be able to recognize those easier, you know? And should be able to catch the kids who need more support.
So that's the Ellis data, and then if you move to the next chart, you'll see middle school and high school. And this is a little bit different, as Brian had mentioned before. These are the self-screeners. I mean, this is giving you a snapshot of what our students are feeling and where their needs are within these specific competencies. I mean, it's not asking personal questions. They're very general. Questions related to these areas. So with the middle and high school, the largest area of deficits that were indicated were decision-making and optimistic thinking. So those were the key areas that PPS, the said, okay, definitely, we're going to start trying to get creative in going into classrooms, doing some presentations, also working with the PBIS, trying to gather more information and get that out to students through the PBIS supports. So the other thing in looking at this data, we just met again this July, PPS, and we're talking about, we're like, okay, so we have these things, we have the character ed, we have PBIS, but we're seeing, you know, middle and high school, there's still a little bit more need. So how can we help support that need? So taking a look at what is already in the curriculum, what is already in the health curriculum, what about ELA, what about, you know, are there maybe novels that talk about dealing with anxiety, or someone who is experiencing some difficulty with anxiety or decision making or not feeling good about themselves, trying to really incorporate those types of skills within the curriculum. And also too, I want to make sure that I bring this up as well, the students that are in the red or need more instruction are also students, some of the students have IEPs, they're receiving counseling, and it's on their IEP, so some of those students that may have flagged a significant need are having one-to-one counseling or group counseling. We've also, as was already mentioned, we have Twin Counties coming in, they're also able to do presentations within the classrooms to help support social emotional learning. I know it's a big umbrella and it's multifaceted, but we want to make sure the bottom line is, you know, this data is giving us a snapshot of what our students need and needs are, and how can we provide a variety of different supports to help these students.
Did we break out the middle school from the high school?
We can do that. We didn't in these charts only because it's the self-screeners. Middle school is also doing the self-screener as well as the high school. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this next slide shows our chronic absenteeism rates across the past several Junes. And just a note, chronic absenteeism is defined as missing 10% or more of days of school, regardless of whether or not they are excused or unexcused. So when we look at this, we can see that at the end of the school year, Ellis was at 18.6%, middle school was at 20.9%, and high school was at 27.5%. We had a lot of really good interventions this year across the different buildings. Each of them was very different. In Ellis, we had mentors supporting some of our students who at the end of last year, we saw that their attendance was very poor, and we thought we had a couple of kids we thought could do well with having a mentor support them. In the middle school, we also had mentors, and we also had a high number of students in our Tier 3 labs, which is a lab that happens every single day. So instead of them going to a study hall with 24 kids in it, they would go and it would just be them and 2 other students, and they would focus on organizing, prioritizing their work. They developed very good relationships with those teachers to really help support them in their attendance, in their how they're feeling about school, feeling engaged, you know, and motivated, and that went really well. We saw a lot of our kids at the beginning of the year when they were struggling in those first 2 quarters really make some good growth in the last half of the year. And in high school, we saw a really great dip in our chronic absenteeism. We met with a lot of parents and talked with a lot of students this year, coming up with attendance plans. What can you specifically do to support your attendance? What do you need to do? Like, what do those action steps look like? And you know, you have to get the buy-in. So if it's not realistic in their mind, they're not gonna go for it. So we felt good. That's a big decrease there, and I can see the kids in my mind and thinking where they were at the beginning of the year, and just having, whether it was like a person that would check in with them more regularly, or those phone calls home, or coming in and checking in and saying, hey, I didn't see you yesterday, what happened? Just doing more of that and letting them know that we do recognize that they're not in school and why, I think made a big impact.
Just a quick question. We auto-generate letters if they've missed X amount of days. Are we still doing that? Because I think there were some parents that were upset.
About the letters, yes. So we are going back and looking at the letters again. We do have letters when it gets to the 16 days, 20, 24, and then 30. There is a part of the letter that does say, you know, we could take some of these steps if you're not reaching out to us and willing to work with us, basically. So along with those letters, I always call the parents personally and talk to them about like, hey, what's going on? Once it gets to that 20-day mark, I encourage them to come in and meet with myself, a PPS member, a teacher, and we talk through like, what can we do to support you? And you know, the language isn't friendly at that point in that part of the letter. Oftentimes I'll attach a note saying, you know, I know that a lot of the absences were excused. We have some students who had medical challenges, and so, you know, they get this letter that says, hey, they're missing this many days, but I know in my head, well, this is why, right? So I always point that out, like, okay, you had 20 days excused because of this medical reason, however, only 6 unexcused days, which is not that bad when you get to the end of the year. So you gotta just take it kid by kid, but we always go back and relook at the language of the letters and try to make it more positive and more supportive for the parents. So that's something that we're doing.
And so still sticking with culture, but just moving on to an overview of discipline. So before we get into this at the individual building level, just here's a look at district-wide discipline referral trends over the past several years. You know, keep in mind here, we've had different principals in different buildings, with the exception of the middle school over this time. So different sheriffs in town, so to speak. So what I will do is hand it over to each principal to provide context for their building's data and to talk about some of the factors behind these numbers and some of the work that they've done related to it. Mr. Urban, I'll send this mic down to you.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everybody. What we are looking at here is a pie chart that shows 3 tiers of referrals. I'm happy to report that about 90%, 88.8% of our students at Ellis did not receive a single referral last year. We like to look at that second tier. Those are students that have received 1 to 4 referrals over the course of the year. There were 51 students at Ellis this year that received anywhere from 1 to 4 referrals. That's about 10% of our student population. I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of those referrals came in 1 of 3 places, and that would be the lunchroom, the playground, or the school bus. And so that has helped us to think about how we can help those students. I think you've heard a little bit about self-regulation. We've talked a little bit about executive functioning. Brooke was just talking about self-awareness. All of these skills and traits are still developing for students this age down at Ellis, and so we have a number of interventions that we're going to try this year to help educate those students on ways that they can essentially help themselves. I think it's fair to say that our teachers are very strong classroom managers. Very few of these referrals are happening in classrooms and interrupting instruction, which is a good thing. The flip side of that is when you remove that elementary age security blanket of your teacher with you all the time is where we tend to see kids that get into situations they don't know how to handle those situations by themselves. So we've kind of pinpointed that as our culture goal for this year at Ellis, and it comes from this data right here.
At the middle school, we continue to stress relationships and connections, consistent connection with people in the building. We continue with our PBIS program, Positive Behavior Intervention Supports, with our teachers and adults. And many of our teachers and adults under the PBIS program handle a lot of what we call minor infractions, like things that they would typically handle, but they also try to monitor that in terms of seeing, is it building? And is there something we need to do to help support a teacher if they're getting to a point where the interventions they're trying one-to-one, which is what we want to happen first, aren't going as well. We continue to talk about the positive behavior and expectations. We've crossed the goals this past year, and we'll continue this year trying to just be more consistent with expectations in the building, consistent language across all 3 grade levels so that students are continuously hearing that from the adults in the building. But let's dive a little bit more into these referrals. Why so high this year too? So the number of referrals are up from 23-24 with 456 referrals this past year with 622. When you dive into each piece of the pie, so we'll go first with the 25 students who had 5 or more referrals, or 10% of the 239 students last year generated 87% of the discipline referrals. So that's actually 546 of the 622 referrals were by 25 students. Which means we had 212 students who only had 76 referrals. So that, that's why we're trying to dive into this summer. We looked at this a little bit deeper. And then if you break that 25 down even more, 3 of the 25 had a total of 238 referrals. One student had 105, 182, one had 51. So they 44% of those 3 students were up to 546 referrals. And those students we continued through the middle of the year, started working on other interventions with. We've also reached out to outside resources. We put one student who used some of the Twin County resources to help their behaviors during the school year. These 3 are definitely were some outliers. So again, I tried to just take a look at that data a little bit more. So if you were to pull just those 3 students out and subtract it from 622, we had 384 referrals last year. So if you compare that to the June 23-24 data, we would have been down again. So those 3 just really were some outliers that we've got interventions in place for all 3 of them, and going into this year too. One stemmed around insubordination with a cell phone. There's more things this year that will be helpful with that too. So again, just trying to dig into some of those. But as a building, we also felt there was definitely some more disruptive behavior in the classroom that was taken away a little bit from instructional time. So we talked about that as a BLT of how we will focus on that this year in terms of, again, trying with more of this consistent classroom expectation and trying to make sure we're with any student that if we're starting to see minor problems that we're getting ahead of it before it becomes bigger. And then also, as we dive into that data, because some of those 25 students are still in the building here in the fall, we're going to, before the school year starts, I've already started to talk to Brooke about it, is take a look at some of the Apture data and compare it to see if some of those students with the SEL Apture data scored really low on that or at risk, does it match up with referrals? Just to try to get more information on these students and see how we can keep supporting them. But, we definitely, like I said, I wanted to dive into that because there's a story with everything. But, we definitely are continuing to look at that. And, these are numbers I will share with the staff too, because I think sometimes there's this perception of, oh my gosh, there's so much going on, but we have a lot of really good students doing the right things every day. And that's the bigger thing. And when you take a look at that, really dive into this, break it down more. So.
Quick question, are your 3 outliers moving on, or are they still with you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I guess we know what next year's numbers might look like at the high school.
No.
He's so nice when he passes
They're still here. I can still support them.
All right, so now we'll take a look at the high school breakdown. As you saw from the slide that Matt was talking about, we ended the school year with 315 referrals, which was down a little over 100 from the previous school year, so that was a positive. When we think about the RTI pyramid, that's what Brian alluded to earlier as well too, we want like about 80% of our students, well, we want more than that, but it would make sense that 80% of our students were in tier 1, doing the right thing. So if you, as you can see, there's 256 students, which is 76% of our high school population. They're doing the right thing and they do not have any referrals. You can see how many students that were falling in our tier 2. And our tier 3 should have been 5%, which should have been 17 students, so we're a little over with those 19 students. So when I think about those 19 students, 14 of them are freshmen, and we really struggled with our freshman group. I feel like I say that every year though too, that we struggle with our freshman group. But I always give freshmen the benefit of the doubt as well too, in the sense that yes, they're in the same school, they're in the same building, right? And they're just coming from middle school to high school, but it is a big adjustment because now they're the small fish in the bigger pond, and they're still trying to figure out like where they belong. And they do make a lot of impulsive decisions, or they make poor decisions. That's something we've talked about with Aperture, and they just try to impress some of their friends or some older students in order to get some of these referrals. I will say though, we did have 3 students that were not freshmen that were getting referrals. And 2 out of those 3 students that were not freshmen had a combined 44 referrals. So that was something that we definitely took a look at throughout the school year. I kind of broke my data down kind of like Brian did as well too. So this is where our SEL support plans really come into place. Because we know alone that consequences don't change behavior alone. Something else has got to be replacement, or we have to work on some coping skills, strategies and skills. So some of these students, some of the 19 students that got all of these 5 more referrals, 3 of them were part of our behavior classroom, where their individual classroom plans just needed to be changed a little bit, tweaked. We had 2 students that did have a change in placement, and when I say change in placement, I don't mean that they were moved to an outside school. It could be that they were part of our consultant special ed program and they were moved to our behavior program, things of that nature. We worked with a lot of those other 19 students though to make sure that they were given strategies, and we had to do a lot of exploration of strategies with some of those students. I will say 2 of the students did move out of district, so that will help our numbers for next school year. And I'm really happy to report that 2 of those students had a really rough start to the school year, and then they had no referrals from like December on. So I always see that, especially with freshmen, as growth or maturity that we usually don't always see right away. So the highest number of referrals still this school year was skipped class. That's something that we focused on the past couple of years. You can see that, that's on the bottom table. We had 182 2 years ago, 126 1 year ago, and then this past year we've had 99 referrals for skipped classes. So that has been our goal in our VSIP plan, and it's something that we've really focused on. I think a big piece of that is the engagement that we've really been working on, that and relationships. When kids like you and they enjoy your class, there's no reason for them to skip a class. So that's something that we've really worked on. But that was 22% of our total referrals this year was skipped classes. So that number is going down, and I'm really proud of the work that the high school teachers are doing.
So when they're skipping classes, where do they go?
So a little bit of everywhere. It's not just the bathroom. Sometimes they have some really good hiding places, like the alcoves, until I like pop around the corner and find them. So sometimes it's the alcove. Sometimes another teacher inadvertently lets them in, like, oh, like, I'll look right at you, Tracy, and say I had lunch. And you're like, oh, great, come on in. And I really don't have lunch. I have a different class, right? So there's some things that we're doing next school year as well, too, that will tighten up a little bit of that process. Sometimes they'll come to the library, and again, they have a great process here of signing in, but when you have an influx of kids coming in at the same time, and 9 out of the 10 kids just sign in, and then they just go sit with a friend. So just tightening up on some of the things that we're doing in order to catch some of those students. Are some of the students going in, and hiding out in the bathroom? Absolutely. I've a handful of teachers that will stop by and say, I'm hearing some singing coming from the bathroom. You might want to go check on it. And of course, it's usually kids that should be in class rather than singing in the bathroom. Yeah. Good question.
Brian, and Christy, I have a question on these referrals or the discipline. Your tiers reference number of referrals. not severity of the issue, correct? In the future, I think it might be helpful for us to understand, and you alluded to some of it, what the kids are actually doing, skipping class, vaping, however it goes.
It is in your building program.
Okay, very good then. I get
There's
you.
another pie chart in
I
there.
think you get like the top 10 or so, like most common
Okay, very
it's,
good.
types of problems that you're getting in a breakdown of that in your June profile, one for middle school, one for high school.
When the teacher submits a referral, I'm assuming they're all acted on, right? By a principal or so?
Yeah, and if they're not acted on, I have a conversation, like if it's sometimes a referral submitted, and has like a wrong name in it, or like if there's a mistake or an error, or if there's ever a reason where like a referral needs to be deleted, like it was a bigger, not consequence, but if it was a bigger infraction and I already wrote the referral for it, and then you wrote out, I'm gonna go to you and say, Dave, just so you know, I already wrote the referral for that, so I'm gonna delete the one that you wrote in there. I always tend to touch base with the teachers to let them know, you know.
So that is, my next question is, what the referral is. Because if there's no, I'm fearing that if there's no feedback to the teacher, or there's no, I'm not gonna use the word punishment, but no consequence for the behavior that was written,
I feel like they shouldn't be back in their class for a couple days, I'm absolutely letting you know. But I know it was a conversation that we had, and an email was sent to Scott, and he said he'll see what he can do about it with regards to synergy, because it was something that was provided when we had school tool. So when a referral was closed out, the consequence assigned, but the teachers are able to go back in and see any referral that they've written, and they should see that it's closed out and that there was a consequence given disposition.
Thanks for that. Back to the attendance data, I'm wondering if it would be useful for us to see it broken down more, in the sense that month to month, there are a given number of educational days, and I'm not going to ask you to provide, total educational hours or opportunities in a given month. On a month like June, in reality, with all the testing that goes on, there may be only 14 or 13 total days of education. So if the kids are taking field trips, or they're absent, or medical things are going on, the attendance in June ends up being pretty critical as far as end of the year performance failures and then total course failures. So I think some of that data might enlighten the board as far as the outcome of absenteeism.
David, you bring up a really good point there when you're talking about attendance at different times of the year, and there have been conversations around, one of the things you brought up, field trips, right? We get to the end of the school year, we get to May, and we get to June, and we can get heavy on field trips at those times, right? And these are good opportunities for students, but it's also about planning way ahead so that teachers, so we see what's the impact on that, right? Okay, there's 12 instructional days here in this month. These kids are going to miss 4 of them for field trips, and they've got to sit for regents in 3 weeks. Well, we got to understand the implications of that. So that's a really good point, and just kind of understanding, yeah, there's an attendance whether he's here or not, but back to the point when we were talking about iReady, and we're talking about that instructional time that we have being our most precious resource, just being very intentional about how we use that.
All right, on goal 3, and from this past year and some of our community highlights, one thing that's not up there that I just wanted to say before I go into some of the goals up there is that, our Facebook and Instagram, talked to Sarah, increased communication on these two social media platforms continues to grow, continue to increase followers, which really helps us build additional trust in terms of an online communication forum for parents and families. In terms of different professional development this past year, one of the district goals really was looking at parent to caregiver communication. We worked with staff this year and provided scripts and different email templates to try to help them, one, do it more often, because it is a time-consuming thing, so to try to make things a little bit simpler and easier for people. And then just also the idea of how to communicate with busy people. We've had a nice forum here in the spring. Some of you attended. We had a really good turnout for that in terms of really taking a look at what was the community's feelings on distraction-free school. From our bell-to-bell policy that now has been adopted that we'll be implementing here in a couple weeks. The Spartan Snapshot Evolution, Sierra has continued to work with that since she's been here, and that I think did well this past year, and she's putting things out weekly. As it says up there was 40 editions last year. They come out on Thursday nights at 6 o'clock. She's doing a little bit of a redesign for this upcoming year, but it has been a good communication tool that we really tried to really enforce families to take a look at, because there's a lot of just daily information that's there if you need it quickly. It's one of the things that we've communicated in terms of just communicating any of our safety drills we have to do, because that's something we have to announce the week before, so that's been in place and we've been able to use that. Talking about safety, Mr. Bennett continues a lot of his quarterly safety letters. In the last fall, and I know we'll be scheduled for one this coming fall, has a safety meeting to talk to parents about that. A lot of that stuff is also communicated into our Spartan Snapshot also. We continue to have strong relationships with our PTSA and PTA Ellis. We've done some different middle school and high schools, and Janelle's come in to do some faculty presentation, board ed presentation, and then, as you heard tonight, we were recognized as a school of excellence, and that was due to a lot of the great work the PTSA really did for that. They put a lot of time into that, and we're very persistent in trying to make sure they got through it, because it was pretty cumbersome. So great job with that. And then, if you haven't seen some, you should check them out. Mr. Urban and his weekly videos, or his mystery readers, have become, I think, I enjoy watching them and listening to him. So I think it's been a nice little communication tool he's been able to establish at the elementary level too. Next, what our perception survey data. So again, this is a survey I think we've used over 10 years now to gather data from students, faculty, and parents. Students, faculty, and parents rate a series of statements on a scale of 1, where they strongly disagree, to 5, strongly agree. It is analyzed each year by our building level teams. It's data we take a look at to help shape our goals or start our building initiatives. And challenges. What we typically are looking at, any of the challenges we've had over the years have fallen within that high 2, low 3 area. I really don't remember a time we've had anything to 1, which is a good sign. But we take a look at those 2s and 3s and see, hey, we've got to try to improve these areas. And they're very detailed statements, so it really allows us to kind of say, where does that fit into our District 3 goals? And then with that, we're able to use some areas to measure quantitative growth with that too. We've used those over the years to see, are we improved in that area from this perception survey data. The perception survey also has open-ended responses. There's 2 of them. The questions are, what are the strengths of the school and what can be improved? And just take a look at the chart. You can see some of the strengths and challenges that are up here that kind of stood out, that kind of, as you went through the statements, really started creating themes or buckets, as Matt would probably say here, Mr. Brookshire. K-12 communication continues to be a strength and also a challenge. Okay? There's a lot of positive communication that the community is saying. There's also a challenge of the communication between teaching and caregivers is inconsistent in some sense, and then that's something that was taken a look at this summer, and it's some initiatives in our upcoming goals for the year. Parents and students also feel some challenges of respect or treatment of student-to-student and peer behavior. Our students definitely also talk about vaping in the restrooms and discomfort with that. Some of the strength from our students, if you look at this, students are saying they have strong relationships with teachers and adults here at the school, which is great. It's something we really have been pushing over the years, because I think if students feel like there's someone here they can talk to, or cares about them or someone they can talk to, that's going to make them hopefully be here and avoid chronic absenteeism or things like that to help with their achievement. Then also, the students have talked about strength. It's positive school climate. Our teachers have talked about some strengths and saying just, they have belief in student potential. They see it, and we all do, and that's what we talk about. Each student has a story, and how do we get them to the end of that book there when they graduate seniors. And then just our teachers and faculty have also talked about strength was trust and leadership, which is important because it is a collaborative effort in buildings and with our BLTs, and that's important that we all trust each other as we work together. Just real quick too, some participation numbers. So that's something. Our numbers are always strong for our students because we make them take it here at school. They are, and of course our faculty and staff. We continue to want more parent and guardians to complete the survey. There was an increase here in the 24-25 years, so we went from 303 K-12 to 328 this past year. Not a big increase, but again, we'd like to really see. I think there was only a little bit of a decline at Ellis. They went from 185 to 172, but both in middle school and high school, which has typically been a little bit lower, we went up pretty significantly. Middle school went 52 to 78, high school went 66 to 78. So again, we'll continue to keep striving to get more parents involved and taking those, but it is stuff that we do take a look at because it is our community talking to us. And we need to see how we can sift through that to see what we can do to make things better, to continue those relationships with our community.
So, moving out of where we are, right, and where we've been, we want to look forward to where we want to go and how are we going to get there, right? So, moving into looking at our strategies for improvement for this upcoming school year, right? So back July 1st, all the data that you have in your hands and more were in the hands of about 30 people in this room as part of our school improvement process. We looked at the data and went through our protocol for looking at data. We brought in a tool from outside, working with a consultant group that helped us to analyze our data using an AI system and gave us recommendations connected to some pretty strong school improvement frameworks. And out of that process came the strategies that we're focusing on at the district level, as well as the strategies that are being focused on at the building level. So if we could just take a few minutes now, we'll each present myself at the district level and then each principal talk a little bit about what their strategies are going to be for this upcoming school year. So starting with curriculum, our first strategy is going to be strengthening vertical and horizontal alignment. Right? So this is connected to a middle school and high school goal. And what this really is at the heart of this, it's about breaking out of traditional boxes of how we use common and collaborative time. It's about being effective with the existing time that we have to do these things. And this idea, it came from, it was in the recommendations from AEG, the consultant group, as saying, hey, this is a high leverage move that your district could make. But it was also something that was in the perception survey results from teachers. And it's been there for some time, which has been like, hey, to do good work, to do better, we need more time together, right? So as a leadership team, we thought, hey, we hear your voice, we know the value in that. Let's look at what we have as a resource, and let's look at how we can kind of think outside the box, how we're using our collaborative time, and even carve out, what we already have. Maybe we can carve out even more for that. The next piece is a continuation of what we did last year at elementary school, which was, last year was the soft rollout of the Bookworms ELA program. Well, this year We are actually moving into full implementation of the program. We spent all last year laying the foundation, training teachers, training aides, training administrators, setting up classrooms that people could visit. Well, now we're going the next level, right? 100%, everybody in from the first day. It's full implementation. Our professional developers from the University of Delaware that were working with us said, hey, we've never seen a rollout like this before. This is really great. Can we do a case study on you? And I said, hold on. Come talk to me in November, right? Like, and so the point being, we have so much work to still do. We've done well in terms of getting to where we are, but we wanted to make this a district and building goal this year to keep the emphasis on it and to keep our foot on the gas, so to speak. Looking at the culture goal, we're, in this sense, our culture goal this year, we're going to be partnering with a community-based organization, Twin Counties, right? That work with them started last year with pilot that Mrs. Macaluso brought into the district. Now, this year we've invested into working with them again. Last year it didn't cost us anything to try that out. We made the investment. So if we're doing that, we want to make sure that what we're doing with them is integrated into the system of supports that we have in our school. It's not enough to just say, hey, we're going to bring in this community partner, let them do their thing. No, we need to make sure they're connected to our system here, connected to the professionals that we have working here, our teachers, members of our guidance counselors, or school psychologists, or social workers. That's how you work together to make changes for kids, right? So we want to make sure that the work we're doing with Twin Counties to support students who may have been exposed to substance abuse, either a problem that they're having themselves or maybe somebody in their family or a friend, so that those students are supported. And the other piece of this isn't just about those students who need intervention, but we know that education has to be part of tackling this issue. Brian talked about the perception surveys, and our middle school and high school students noted, like, hey, I'm not comfortable with using the bathroom because people were vaping in there, right? I don't, they're telling us that. And I wanted to make sure that we were listening to that, and we brought this partner in, and in order for them to be effective, we need to make sure they're connected to everything that we're doing here. So that's what that second goal, our culture goal, is going to be about. That's the strategy there. In community, once again this year, this is boiling down to communication. And Brian spoke to some feedback we've had around, hey, district communication has improved. We really like that. And we spoke about this last year, that there's been feedback that parents and caregivers would appreciate more timely communication for students who are struggling in a course or maybe falling short of expectations. Well, that's tough to do in a world where everyone is busy, right? So part of that is continuing on what we did last year, which is training folks, right? And giving them the tools to do that when they need to, but taking it further this year, and one is looking at our system of supports and what do we, who can do that, who can reach out. Maybe one teacher only has 25 kids in a course, and out of those 25 kids, maybe only 3 are failing. That's manageable, right? You can reach out. Some teachers teach larger courses, larger sections. They have 3 times that number of kids. So proportionally, you may have 3 times the number of parents who need to be reached out to. And so we need to understand in our system, in our intervention system, in those situations where it's like, okay, we know the expectation is we need to reach out to this parent, but how can we do that in a way so we're not placing it all on just one person? Maybe there's a way that our intervention team can support that in those situations. And then, in addition to all of those pieces, it's also about understanding what technology tools we can have. And in the past, the conversation has gone right to, well, what can Synergy do, what can Synergy do? And that is a viable question. And And so we've already started work with them this summer, talking about how can we take away some barriers to parent-teacher communication and make it more efficient for teachers to understand, number one, who needs to be reached out to and when, and then to make it easy for that communication to happen back and forth. So those are the main strategies that have come away from the school improvement work and looking at what's happening at the building levels and then understanding what we're going to do at the district level to support those building level plans.
Well, I would like to thank you. That was a lot of work. It's very apparent that it was a lot of work, so kudos to the entire team. Thank you. And it just really, it's nice to see the work that was done in early July and kind of culminating into specific things and approaching it. And also, I would say, helping us keep the perspective. So some of the referrals, for example, if we have 3 outliers, okay, understanding that, and like you said, a lot of the kids are doing the right thing and everything, and sometimes I think we can lose that message for that, especially when we look at all the data and everything else. I think that as a board member, it is wonderful to have access to all this information and to have it summarized, so thank you.
I do want to let the building principals talk about their building plans, because there's some really excellent things that they're doing that their teams have come up with as well.
So I apologize for jumping the gun. But I was following one. I thought you were touching upon it.
All right, I'm going to send this down to Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Matt. Matt spoke very eloquently to our rollout, which is now a full implementation of bookworms. I would stress that I feel like we are really riding a wave of momentum at Ellis. I think that all of the supports that were provided to our faculty and to our staff and to our administrators were very well received and very thoughtful last year. And so I think folks are really excited to get this underway. The one unique aspect of the program, which is Greenville specific, which I wanted to emphasize, which had not been brought up earlier, is in regards to one of the component blocks of the Bookworms program. So the Bookworms program, just for some quick background, is made up of 3 component blocks throughout the course of the day. One of those blocks, which is referenced here in the curriculum strategy, is the DI block, an acronym that stands for Differentiated Instruction. One of the things that has been done, again, which is Greenville specific, is taking the really great reading phonics curriculum and essentially substituting it or kind of swapping it out for the Bookworms phonics component. And that was done, I think, based on the success of the RGR curriculum here in Greenville. It's something that the faculty, I think, has really done well with over the years and wanted to continue to kind of develop. And so that has kind of been inserted in a very unique, thoughtful way. So I would expect us to see even some more growth when we look at these numbers next year there. So that's strategy number 1. The second strategy references continuing to develop and strengthen our students' executive functioning skills. This is something that's constantly ongoing for us at Ellis. It was interesting last year, we did a in-house survey amongst faculty, and self-regulation amongst our students was the topic that our teachers and staff felt was the greatest area of need, and yet they were ill-equipped to teach. And so it's not only teaching our students, but it's also educating our faculty and our staff when it comes to executive functioning. We did have some success this year using the responsive classroom, interactive modeling program, and so we're going to continue to do that next year. In addition, we're going to push into classrooms this year with the zones of regulation curriculum. Our PPS team members at Ellis have or are planning to attend some trainings over the summer and are excited to push into classrooms. We also feel like the Bookworms curriculum itself is structured to the point that it lends itself to opportunities for our students to practice repeated executive functioning skills at kind of an academic level, which we're excited about. So those are our two curriculum strategies for next year. There is some overlap as we go to culture, because as I mentioned, responsive classroom and zones of regulation, we flirted with those last year and had some success, and so we want to continue to kind of go deeper there. Melissa and Matt both spoke to our mentoring program. We're lucky enough to have some retired Ellis teachers that have returned to Ellis to mentor some of our students there. That's helped with engagement and attendance for sure, so we'd like to continue that. This is, in a sense, a continuation of our goal from last year, strengthening a sense of belonging and hoping that we see a decrease in some of those referrals with the implementation of those programs as well. And then lastly, we have our community goal, again, very similar to our district goal. I think at Ellis, this goal is going to be a little more targeted in that we want parents to know how they can access their information that's coming from teachers. We have a great deal of success with the Seesaw app that teachers use to communicate with parents. In fact, we have 100% of our families that use Seesaw. We can track which families are looking at the messages that are being sent home. We will be sending out class teacher assignments using Seesaw this year, which is new, as opposed to the kind of antiquated letter in the mail. But we're hoping that that is kind of a harbinger, kind of a signal to our parents that this is what we would like to embrace going forward. This is how we plan to communicate. Obviously, there are other methods of communication as well. You know, we mentioned email. Brian teased me a little bit for my videos that I've been making, but we live in a time when people really are super busy. And I say that as a parent of 3 children who are all school-aged. I do not read all of the emails that come home from school, I must admit. So I want to find ways to keep our parents informed, engaged, and I want them to feel like every teacher that we have at Ellis knows their student at a very intimate level, both academically and socially and behaviorally. And I feel like they do. And so I feel like we just need to continue to develop the most effective ways to communicate that to parents. One of the pieces of feedback that came from our perception survey was that parents are looking for communication in between report cards. They like our new approach to report cards, our standard-based approach. They are simple, they're easy to read. If they have questions, teachers respond, but they want to know what's happening in between report cards. And so that's a challenge we have this year from very early on, even before the year starts, into open house. We want parents to know how they can get that information. And so it aligns very nicely with our district goal. The last thing that I would like to mention here is bi-weekly communication from teachers to parents, and making sure that we are holding our teachers accountable, but also make sure they feel supported and sharing that information with parents every 2 weeks, because that's something that's important to those parents. So those are our Ellis goal areas for next year, and we're very excited to get underway. Thank you.
Matt, before you move on, 2 things. One, you mentioned you want to have bi-weekly communication by the students, or by the teachers to the parents. Are they going to be providing time for for that activity?
Yes, and in fact, last year we had a wonderful training from Sierra, our communication specialist, who provided the teachers with templates. These are not going to be, in-depth, exhaustive progress notes, but these are simple classroom messages about, hey, here's what we're doing this week in class.
Okay, so not individual parents?
No, we couldn't ask our teachers to do that. Career suicide, Dave.
On a positive note, get ready. I really enjoy your development of these strategies, your goals. You have expressed what you want to do, what you're going to go after, and how you're going to go after it, and then you have some measuring instrument you're going to plan on using. So I appreciate that goal development.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the middle school, just taking a look at things here, as Matt alluded to in the district goals about the vertical and horizontal collaborative faculty meetings we plan on creating. Christy, Matt, and I are going to start working on that. We've already talked about some planning of things. I'm excited for it. At the middle school, we do a really good job of having, horizontally our teams meeting, grade level teams meeting. But we don't have departments, in order to really department times at the middle school. So that's restructuring some of our faculty meetings for this to help with some of our vertical alignment. I think we'll be very successful, and also just having those teachers be able to talk about aligning more skill progression that's happening. And so that will be, I think, an important piece of that. When we met this summer, teachers are really looking for that too, especially middle school teachers, to be able to have more time to talk with, 6th grade math teacher talking with the 7th and 8th grade math teacher. Them having that time, and we haven't had that time built into a day before. So again, restructure our faculty meetings for that. I think will be a big important piece of things. We're also looking at some of the perception survey data, providing some PD to teachers about including student voice and choice in the classroom. By voice, kind of just getting feedback from students about lessons or a unit test. And we have teachers who are doing some of that, and we need to be more consistent with that and get that out there to that. And then also the idea of just, sharing the engaged instruction that some people are doing with each other, so that more people are seeing it. So similar to that idea of teachers sharing with teachers of what's happening and how is it working well in your classroom, what could I do different in mine? Possibly, again, doing some of our teacher visits, you'll see some of that more engaged instruction going on, but also provide some PD for that, or just having conversations about it, of what they can be doing different to try to help keep students engaged in the classroom. With some of the behavior things, again, we talked about the referrals here a little bit earlier. Last year we started more of a common, what is the with each team, looking at what are the common expectations asked by each team, but now trying to create one more. Yes, we have our code of conduct and some of our PBIS, but what are 5 or 6 really key things that we want everyone to be consistent with throughout the building? Starting this year will definitely be with our cell phones and how we're addressing that. So that's a part of it. And then also taking a look at one of the things I spoke to earlier is we have that minor infraction model where teachers are kind of monitoring the discussions they're having with students about small little behaviors they're dealing with in the classroom. So being more consistent with that, looking at those bi-weekly, this was coming from the teachers about that, so that we're trying to catch things sooner rather than later with some of our students, with some behaviors that are occurring in the classrooms. Because the reality is we felt that some of the root cause of some of those referrals was students either misbehaving, disrupting education in the classroom by either goofing around or maybe arguing with an adult about putting their cell phone away. So, it'll be interesting to see with some of the new cell phone policy, and then if we can get more consistent with some of the expectations by everyone, consistent language, if we can change some of that going forward. And then, as I said before, we're also taking a look at those 25 students to see, do we need to start out with some behavior type plan in place to start the school year, or are there other factors that are causing some of the behavior? So again, comparing the aperture data that we've pulled to see if it matches up with some of these 25 students. And then from the communication standpoint, it's something we've tried, that preferred method of communication. We're actually going to mail home a flyer in the mailer this year to see if that will help, of how parents, families want to be communicated with. Then also just trying to support, provide some PD to our staff, maybe a tool or two they can use to communicate with families if it happens to be after hours. People don't want to use their personal cell phones, right? So is there a different tool we can use or an app that would not show their own personal phone, cell phone number if they needed to? And then the two-way communication, we want to support Parent View. We're looking at trying to make sure people are signing up for Parent View. Yes, we have people on that, but there's not enough. Similar perception survey, not everyone is signed up for Parent View. Same with the perception survey, people aren't necessarily completing that. Looking to hopefully partner with our PTSA this year to have hopefully a little tutorial at a PTSA meeting one night on Parent View. I mean, there are very detailed directions online, but I think sometimes people come in person, be able to ask questions might be a helpful thing. And then discussion which we had this summer was just, again, timeliness with assignments into gradebook, so that communication is not coming 5 or 6 weeks down the road. So making sure, kind of what are the ranges for certain type of assignments and how they're entered and when they're entered in the gradebook. Kind of providing ranges for people we've talked about in the past as a faculty, but to continue to keep promoting that, because it not only is it important externally, it's also important internally for people who are trying to support some of the students to see what are they missing in other classes, and if it's not showing up, if someone is in a tier 3 lab trying to support a student, they don't necessarily know if a student's missing a assignment or not either. So again, just internally and externally with that. And then also just, each of the teams provide like a website tool for parents to look at where homework assignments are, making sure teams are being consistent with that. So again, that kind of came all out of our discussions this summer, which we had some great discussions with. So we have a lot of action items to take care of, but I think we're pretty excited and pleased with how things ended up from looking at the data in our work this summer.
Okay. All right. High school. So let's take a look at our 2 curriculum strategies that we have up there. Again, you see the common theme. Our first strategy is to align curriculum across subject and grade levels. We recognize that this is a multi-year effort, but we also understand that its importance, and so starting this year is really exciting for us. In order to support this work, we are building to dedicate time during faculty meetings, superintendent's conference days, department meetings, anytime that we can find where teachers can get together when they usually don't have the time to meet like that. In addition, we'll utilize our Questar content specialists to assist departments through this process as well too. If you take a look at our second strategy there, it's to implement high leverage engagement practices to increase student participation, collaboration, and critical thinking across all content areas. We'll continue with our collaborative visits that we began a few years ago, and it gained some strong momentum last year, so we really want to encourage that continued use. We will also promote the integration of AI technology to enhance both engagement and instruction, slowly. And additionally, we'll incorporate strategies from Building Thinking Classrooms, which offers practical strategies for deepening thinking or student learning. And our media specialist and technology specialist will help provide quarterly mini PDs for teachers to share additional tools and approaches that also foster engagement. That moves us to our culture goal. Our culture goal may look similar to previous years as well. It's to communicate clear behavioral expectations to all stakeholders. This year we've added several new action steps, including a non-negotiable list that includes 5 school-wide expectations. Those were the little things that I was talking about earlier that could be like our quick wins, and if everybody's held accountable to it, not just students, but faculty and staff as well too, we're gonna post them. So a simple example is so kids aren't in the hallway without passes. I'll ask a student where they're going, and they just show me a bathroom pass, and they keep walking. So that's not just because you have a bathroom pass doesn't mean that you can go upstairs when you're on the first floor, and do whatever you were intended to do. So just quick little things like that, they'll be posted, and then not only will it hold students accountable, it can also hold, some of our teachers accountable as well too, for, like, you don't have to let 2 kids out of the bathroom, or out to use the bathroom at the same time just because they asked. That's one of our non-negotiables, 1 student out at a time. These will consistently hold students and teacher and faculty and staff accountable. Our community goal focuses on strengthening both internal and external connections. This includes encouraging regular communication between teachers and parents/families, as well as implementing like a beginning of the year end of the year checklist and a shared field trip calendar. Matt kind of mentioned field trip calendar or field trips earlier, and that's something that I think over the past couple of years, field trips have really been like overtaking some valuable instructional time at the end of the school year. So these tools will support better planning and coordination among the high school staff. So those are what our goals look like for the high school.
Thank you. All right, appreciate your questions throughout. I wanted to pause here before we wrap things up to see if anybody had been holding on to anything until the end.
Here's one question I have on the referrals. How quick do you get referrals to the parents?
Let's get started. Drive safely.
Sorry,
Typically, 99% of my referrals, I'm calling home, what's going on, or I see if the teacher has already made contact with the parent about the referral, that they maybe submit a referral to me. So again, depending on how the severity of it, if the teacher's already reached out and is still submitting a referral, then I probably won't, but most of the time, I'm also calling when I process a referral, so.
And I'm really only calling for the most severe, because my expectation is if it's something that happens in your classroom, who's best to answer or to share with the parent what had happened. Because I don't want to be the middleman. Well, let me go see with Mr. Reed what happened, so I can share with you, and then you ask questions that I can't answer because it was Mr. Reed's classroom. So my expectation, if it's something that happens in a classroom, the teacher really should be notifying the parents, like, hey, this is what happened today. Unfortunately, I had to write a referral for your child. If it's something that escalates, especially at the high school level, freshmen, it's a little bit different. I will call home a little bit more, but if a student is getting like a lunch detention, I might not call home the first or second time, but if it's something where I'm giving multiple consequences, then that's when I'm making those calls to parents.
Any other questions?
All right, so tonight's review shows that we've made some progress in some important areas, and in others, the data tells us that we still have work to do, right? But we know that, right? We know that our work will never be done. That's the reality of continuous improvement. That's the philosophy behind it. Our vision to be a district where everyone learns, teaches, and belongs, that's the guidepost. That's the target. That's what we're using to help us understand the work that's ahead of us. So with the strategies that the folks here have outlined tonight, we're committed to building on our strengths. We're committed to looking in the mirror and understanding what our challenges are and addressing those. And we're committing to make sure that every student who comes into Ellis or into the middle school and the high school here feels like they belong, feels like they're learning, feels like they're part of something here. Thank you for what you do to help make that happen, and everybody that's up here, thank you for what you do to help make that happen. Have a wonderful day. Well, I know.
Thank you. And what I said before still applies, so hold on. Okay, remember, I can't see what is behind me. Thank you.
Your phone's ready to go.
All right, I'm going to move us on to some of the discussion items. So first up is an update on the capital project by our superintendent.
Yes, before I do get into that, I just do want to thank our leadership team. I always get a kick out of people saying over the summer that things really slow down, but you saw tonight the work not only of our leaders and our administrative team, but the many faculty, staff members who came and worked at the building levels. It's pretty impressive to see how much work they've been able to get done, really in not even 6 weeks. So on top of everything else they're doing, so I want to thank them for that. So with that said, moving into capital project update. It is somewhat short because it's primarily good news. We are in a position where we are feeling very good about the status of our classrooms and the buildings right now. We are expecting to have a few more classrooms turned over to Rich and our buildings and grounds folks that have been renovated so that we can get them up and ready for the start of the school year. Right now, all instructional spaces are on time in regards to getting us ready for the start of when kids get here or faculty and staff come back. So we're very pleased about that. We met with Bunkhouse, or Bunkoff Schoolhouse, I'm sorry it's getting late, on the other day to talk about, on Friday, to talk about some of the contingency money that is left within the budget. We held on to quite a bit of money, anticipating the possibility of needing, as we saw last summer, the need to dive in and get some more money for things that were unexpected. If you remember correctly, over the winter and into the early spring, we really pushed to have a sit-down page-turn meeting with everybody involved to make sure that we really cut down on any surprises that we got last year. And I think that helped to move the project along in a way that is being productive. And so what our meeting on Friday was really to talk about is, okay, what are some of these things that we can do that are within the scope of the project and can be done with this money. So a couple of smaller things that we took a look at, but the big things really were some of the updating to the strobes and the fire alarm systems that we put in the front of Ellis, being able to do that for all of Ellis, so the system is all working together in one way. So we were looking to get some quotes on that, with the understanding that the contractors that are there to do it would need to be working past the start of the school year, working second shift to get us through that project, understanding that we want to have this all the work done and completed by November so that we can have that December closeout. So we are in a good space there and feeling really strong about the work that's being done and getting us ready for our kids to start the new school year. Any questions about that?
All right, Mike, then I'll let you turn the page, and you are up for procedures on internet-connected devices.
So apparently we have to have procedures now, don't we? No, we have spent we have spent a lot of time this summer taking a look at, obviously we have worked with the policy committee to create the policy. At the end of the school year, we have got to the point with the code of conduct that really drives what the consequences are going to be. So really the procedural part was really going to be up to our building leaders and our administrative team to come up and take a look at. So we spent some time at retreat, then we spent some time last Thursday, we spent some time, and then again today we had another extended cabinet meeting this morning to kind of review where we're at. As you may know, that we've sent out the first communication to our community, to our faculty and staff, to our students in regards to the policy, where we're at, and we would be providing them more information as we got on with the summer with the procedures. So with that said, we have really worked out, asked a lot of questions, talked a lot about internally where we were at with things. Part of our cabinet today, we also had Chris Honeywell and Laura McCloskey from Honeywell Law Firm down to talk about different things, cell phones being one of them. So we talked really about how to go about rolling things out. And so with that said, we are in a position now to communicate more information in regards to expectations. We met with, this afternoon, a gentleman from Yonder Pouch to talk about, because we wanted to know exactly what these things look like. So we got a really good handle on, where they're going to be accessible in the schools, how we're going to set up to make sure that we are, at least for the first month to 6 weeks, being sure that we are checking in with students as they're coming into the buildings to have their devices put away. One of the questions we had were, will the pouches be big enough for not only the phones, but the watches and earbuds, yes, AirPods, earbuds, and we were able to put cases, everything right into these devices. So we're in a good spot there. We talked about the collection or the dispersing of the pouches and what that can look like. But we couldn't really do anything until we met with a gentleman today. And we were looking to have these in the district by the end of next week, beginning of the following week. So we're in a good spot to be able to do that. With that said, we will put out another communication within the week to kind of summarize where we're at with things, and then it'll be an extensive part of our opening day with our faculty and staff in regards to what to expect. We've also carved out part of our superintendent's conference day to go over the expectation of our faculty and staff, but for those folks, clerical folks, our buildings and grounds folks who may be in the buildings throughout the course of the day, what those expectations are going to be. So we're happy with where we're at and moving forward with that.
Quick question, for the Yonder pouches, where will they be holding, or where will they be kept?
They will be kept on their person. So each student will be able to hold on to their own Yonder pouch. So, that's it.
Any other questions? All right, then I'm going to move us on to the Leadership in Education Conference that Kelly and I attended. Kelly attended it both days, I attended Friday only. It was a lot of discussion about Portrait of a Graduate and some of the changes that are going to be happening over the next several years. It was interesting because they're New York State is building the plane as they're flying it, is probably the best way to describe it. They provided an overview of the different pathways that students will be able to graduate from high school and what is happening to the Regents exams. So Regents exams will be decoupled from the requirement of graduation. However, the exams will still be available for students that wish to demonstrate their knowledge, achieve certificates or seals of approval on the one New York State diploma for that. During several of the sessions, there were a lot of questions, very detailed questions, and that's where it kind of became obvious that They're not quite sure. They're going through. I think one of the things that happened with the Regent is that they moved the timing forward. So they were initially supposed to approve it in November, and they in fact approved it in July. And as a result of that shift of several months, then the actual procedures, how things are going to be worked through and everything are being decided right now for that. In looking at it, and they laid out the different years of when it will be put into place. And Mike, maybe you can help me here, because it was kind of like the 8th grade cohort now that's taking Regents, but they sort of won't count, but they will count. So there's a lot that they're not aware of.
Yeah, I think you're right, in the sense that they have a blueprint on what they want to do. One of the questions that we have is the phasing and how they describe the phasing. We're not exactly sure what's in those phasing. There are a number of us who will be going to a training this Thursday over at Questar 3, and we're hoping to get a bit more information in regards to what that phase in or phase out will look like. But at this point, we're still just trying to figure our way through all this. And from our standpoint, one of the big things I've got questions around is what will be important for us from a Board of Education standpoint and a budget standpoint is, when we start to take a look at sections and what we're teaching and what we're offering, we're a small district. We don't have a lot of teachers teaching different things. So really understanding what those pathways can look like, so we can work with our faculty to see what classes we're going to be teaching and need to teach.
And I think that the concept is the right one in the sense of allowing students to demonstrate mastery in different ways and not just through a bubble test for that. But I think that the specifics where it comes down to the counselors need to ensure that the students have met the requirements in order to graduate, that's where there's going to be more information that's going to be needed. All right, and then let's see, we have the review the draft of the budget development calendar.
Yes, again, this is something that's been on our board agenda for a little bit now. This afternoon, later in the meeting, we'll be talking about adopting the development calendar. Hasn't really changed all that much. Any questions about that?
All right, so then 5.5, the second reading, we have the updated policies. We have the student code of conduct, which thank you, Daphne, for doing the red line, which it definitely was helpful to see what the changes were and to be able to track some of the additions that were made for that. And then we have the maximum temperatures in school buildings. If anyone has any questions related to those two items. All right, then I'm going to move us on to action items. So the first one, I need a motion to approve the minutes. I'm going to combine 6.1 and 6.2. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the July 14th organizational meeting and the July 14th business meeting.
Eric and Jim?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I need a motion to approve the finance reports for the month ending June 30th, 2025 and July 31st, 2025. There are two sets in there.
Eric, any second? Dave?
Any discussion? And I will go on the record as saying, when I looked at the June ones, I was like, what? And then I called Todd, and then after we spoke, then I realized, no, never mind, there's a whole other set of reports, so. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I need a motion to approve the personnel agenda.
Jim, second. Eric?
Any discussion?
I mean, it. I'll just give everybody a heads up.
As a volunteer, non-paid. I did like the fact that they condensed all the substitutes and the chaperones into one master list. I thought that was brilliant.
We do that every year. Come on.
Let's not share it every year.
I haven't seen it every year. For that, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I need a motion to accept the Committee on Special Education recommendations.
Jim, Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to establish the tax warrant for the 25-26 year.
Eric, in a second. Dave?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to accept the 25-26 bus routes.
In a second. Jim?
Any discussion? I just want to say it's a lot of work to put all this together. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to appoint the following individuals to serve on the Board of Voter Registration, and they are listed there.
Eric and Jim?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the 25-26 budget development calendar.
Dave? Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the Questar 3 initial service contract with the Greenville Central School District for the 25-26 school year.
Dave? Jim?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the resolution of the Board of Education of the Greenville Central School District of the State of New York for the purpose of entering into a contract for cooperative educational services.
Jim? Dave?
Any discussion about our copier? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the preschool memorandum of agreement between the Greenville Central School District and United Methodist Church, UMC, Daycare Center for the 25-26 school year.
Jim and Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the contract between the Greenville Central School District and the Devereaux Advanced Behavior Health from July 21st, 25 through June 30th, 2026.
Eric, in a second. Jim?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the contract between the Greenville Central School District and Vanderheiden from September 3rd, 2025 through June 26th, 2026.
Eric and Dave?
Any discussion? Did I pronounce it correctly? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to award the contract transportation bids for the 25-26 school year.
Eric and Jim?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the policies 6230, student code of conduct, and 9020, maximum temperatures in school buildings and facilities.
Eric? Dave?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Need,
No, thank you. So make sure.
we're just moving right along. I need a motion to approve the overnight field trip for the FFA National Convention in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Eric and Jim?
Any discussion?
Best part.
Hmm?
This is the best part.
I know, it's a fabulous trip. It absolutely is. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I need a motion to donation to the Greenville Central School District for the GHS clay trap team in the amount of $1,970, I'm going to round it up, in $80 to be used towards the purchase of back-to-school supplies.
Eric and Jim?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve, yes, thank you. I need a motion to approve the surplus items. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Input items for discussion at a future meeting, if anyone has anything they would like added over the next couple of months. All right, just let us know. And a couple of reminders. See.
There's something in August, isn't there?
Yeah. Right, next week. Isn't that the 18th?
Oh.
Right. All right, so we've got the board goals on the 18th, next Monday. And then we have September 8th, we have the tour of facilities, which begins at Ellis Elementary Cafeteria at 6 p.m. Then we have our normal business meeting on the 15th and followed by, in October by another business meeting. So please mark your calendars accordingly. And then closing open forum. Please note the same guidelines apply as stated during the first open forum. Is there anyone that would like to say anything or speak? Do we have any emails? All right, then if I could have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
David? Jim?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
I just need everyone to stop by before they leave. Sign the attachment.
Okay.